John, it's been a pretty epic day of broadcasting. David Hawkins earlier today brought forward a new 9/11 theory that people are going to be very interested in hearing about. And we now are joined by Larry Klayman, who is going to help answer questions that we have about citizens' arrests. John, Larry, welcome to the show, guys.
You're welcome, Jason. Nice to meet John Cullen. My pleasure and honor.
Well, thank you, Larry. It's my honor. I've been following your work. I was telling Jason last week that you're a big part of the reason that I didn't vote for Bill Clinton was when you brought Jennifer Flowers out. And I know it's going back a couple years, but for me in my life, that was the first I saw you on television was with Jennifer Flowers at her side. And, it's going back a couple years. So you've been a hero of mine representing, sort of the underrepresented, shall we say. And you have done it in the face of power. Like, I don't know anybody who's done what you've done. It's really quite remarkable. And I'm so grateful that you're here on the show today. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. Well, now, Larry, so to introduce you a bit to John, he and I got to know each other. This is actually interesting. I didn't realize this until right now. I met Larry when I was in Las Vegas investigating the Las Vegas shooting, and viewers were like, hey, you better go over to the Bundy trial. And Larry was there, of course. That was our first interview outside the courthouse. And Larry, I met John because he has done remarkable research on the Las Vegas shooting. So this is actually sort of a meeting meant to be, I think you'd call it kismet.
I guess.
Well, yeah, I don't know about kismet. But again, I'm so grateful, and Larry, I admire your work so much. I wanted to make sure that our audience. I know that you do shows with Jason rather regularly, but my audience may not be that familiar with your work. And if you don't mind me embarrassing you just for like a minute or 30 seconds or so, I just want my audience to understand why it was so meaningful for me to have you on the show. So will you indulge me for 30 seconds if you don't mind?
Take 2 minutes.
So Jason, if you can pull up that deck that I sent you, the first slide, I want the audience to understand, Larry's background. So first of all, we're going to talk about Larry's book. Larry's got a book out called It Takes a Revolution. And Larry did a show with Jason, I guess, about 2.5, 3 weeks ago after the election. And Larry was a bit impassioned, and it moved me. And after I saw that, I said to Jason, we need to get Larry on the show because he and I are just feeling a lot of the same things, and I respect him so much. It'll be great. So I want the audience to understand a little bit of the background of who is Larry Klayman and why was it so meaningful for me to get him here. So Larry studied at Duke University and has a JD from Emory. Emory's down in Atlanta, right next door to Coca-Cola, right? So
Coca-Cola basically owns the school, John.
for all intents and purposes, exactly. So with a JD from Emory, you served in the U.S. Justice Department as a prosecutor in your earlier years, right? And then from there, and stop me if I'm lying, please, right? Hit the buzzer. We have a buzzer here. So if I'm lying, hit the buzzer. All right, let me know. But you were one of the original founders of both Freedom Watch and Judicial Watch. And in fact, the character in the show The West Wing, Larry Claypool, is based on you, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I was actually the founder of Judicial Watch, although the current people who run Judicial Watch forgot to found it, okay, for a number of reasons. But so yes, it was Harry Claypool.
Watch, right. And then your character, I'd call it a caricature of you in The West Wing as this Larry Claypool guy. But meaningfully, seriously, you filed lawsuits against Hillary Clinton, against Eric Holder, against Al Sharpton, against Louis Farrakhan, against Bill Clinton. You filed lawsuits against George Soros, for God's sakes. And when people, I think the thing about the audience is the audience wants to know, what can we do? And the difference is you're the guy who keeps doing stuff. You keep actually taking action. And the audience may not know that you're the only person that's filed a lawsuit against the NSA and has actually won the judgment. This was about the phone records, right? This was in 2014. Can you tell the audience just a little bit about that? Tell them about that NSA, because you're the only guy that's ever done this.
Well, we filed a lawsuit. We like to be the first, John. We filed the lawsuit 2 days after Edward Snowden made the revelations of the mass surveillance. It went before Judge Richard Leon, who at the time was very motivated and entered preliminary injunctions against Obama's NSA and the intelligence agencies. He found that mass surveillance was almost Orwellian. And that's what triggered the reenactment of the Patriot Act as the USA Freedom Act. However, that didn't stop the illegal surveillance of the intelligence agencies. They don't care about laws. And I went back to Leon and I said, we need to continue with this case. And I had learned from a whistleblower that Leon himself had been surveilled. And very strangely, he wouldn't let the case go forward at that point. The deep state had struck again in Washington, D.C. But you're right, is that we did establish the legal precedent that mass surveillance is illegal and unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment. No one else has done that other than yours truly and Freedom Watch.
And so I tip my hat to you and salute you for it. You also founded americasheriff.org with Joe Arpaio. And although I'll tip my hat to the art department on the thumbnail, Joe Arpaio is probably a little jealous. I mean, he's the real deal. As far as I'm concerned, it's the two sheriffs in America that matter are Wyatt Earp and Joe Arpaio.
You're right.
I mean,
you're right.
To see, I feel like I'm out of my league in the art department here. That should be Arpaio. He's another hero of mine. So again, I salute your work with him.
I was going to say, which Wyatt Earp movie do you like better? Do you like Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp or Tombstone? I have a debate with a number of my friends on that issue.
Val Kilmer's performance in Tombstone is just ridiculously good. I mean, he should have won an Oscar if he didn't. I don't know.
Yeah, most will agree with you on that. I actually like the other one better. I liked Kevin Costner's. I like the opening scene, if I may take just a few seconds, because it really is where we are today in many ways.
Please.
And it shaped a lot of my current thinking, where the young Wyatt Earp is leaving and his dad, played by Gene Hackman, catches him in the cornfields out in Missouri and says, where do you think you're going? And he says, I'm going to join my brothers, Virgil and Morgan, in the Civil War. They were fighting for the North. And he says, well, you know, your time will come, but when it does come, I want you to understand something. I'm paraphrasing. Look at the trailer. You can find it on Google. He says there are really evil people in this world, people that want to kill you. And when you encounter them, strike first and shoot to kill. And kind of that's the mode that we're in. I don't advocate killing anyone or hurting anybody, but I've always had this philosophy that the best defense is a good offense, and it's best to strike first, not to let them get you, which is what's happening right now with regard to conservative libertarians, people of faith. These leftists want to eliminate us. And I think, you know, in many respects, they want to kill us. And consequently, we do have our backs up against the wall. So the book, at the end, my book, and we can talk about that. I don't want to take your show, but it suggests various things that we can do that, similar to what Wyatt Earp did in the Old West. And that is take legal matters into our own hands, which we have the God-given right and constitutional right to do.
And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. That's exactly why I wanted to have you here, because of what you have in the book and some things that you said on the show a couple weeks ago. And, you know, I don't want to paraphrase. Well, you know, maybe if we can, we'll pull it up later. But again, I don't think the audience understands that you also filed lawsuits against Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, regarding Burisma. And again, the audience frequently in the comments section is saying, what can we do? What can we do? You guys keep researching and you find out all this stuff and you find out all this stuff. What are we going to do about it? And I want them to understand that people like you actually do things about it, right? You file these lawsuits, you take action. And for that, you're to be, you know, acknowledged and applauded, I think.
Well, and as I say in the book, John and Jason, is that I've scored major victories in my 26 years since I founded Judicial Watch and then Freedom Watch, but I barely scratched the surface. And you can see the state that we're in right now. And the federal judges, going back to who I dedicated the book to, which is Thomas Jefferson, Jefferson, I believe, was our greatest of founding fathers in terms of not just his intellect, not only just his writing ability, which created the Declaration of Independence, I think the most moving document ever written, short of the Bible. And I might add that what he was basically saying is that we cannot have federal judges there for life. He found that they would become despots and tyrants because they're unelected and unaccountable to the people. And he predicted that every 20 years or so, that we would have to wage another revolution and shed the blood of patriots yet again. And he added, what's a few thousand dead to refresh the tree of liberty? Now, Jefferson didn't want to see violence. He didn't want to see that. But he was forecasting what was going to happen. And we're at that point because the federal judges in this country are co-opted. They're establishment creatures. They get there primarily on the basis of political campaign contributions and other gratuities, which lines the pockets of those who appoint them, senators and the president. And what you have on the bench are what we had back in 1776 under King George III. You have yes men bought and paid for by the sovereign. And that's why we now have to go outside of the conventional legal system. And as we say in the Declaration of Independence, our forefathers, that we can take actions based upon the law of nature and the law of God. That if you read the Declaration in the beginning, Jason read it in the show we did earlier in the week, is that's what they're saying is we have no legal system anymore, either under King George III or today. And so what I recommend in the book that we try, short of a violent revolution, which I don't want to see happen, but I think inevitably it's going to happen, is that we try citizens' grand juries. And we do have the right to conduct citizens' arrests. That actually stems from ancient England, and every state but 2 states in this country recognizes the right of a citizen to arrest a person who's committing a felony.
I got a question. Sorry, John. Sorry to interrupt, because we're going to be talking about this in depth during the sponsor-exclusive segment in about 15 minutes on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and Subscribestar and Patreon/crowdsource the truth. But Larry, I found myself in an odd situation just Wednesday night. A lot of people saw that in Staten Island, the mayor and the governor of New York have issued what a lot of people feel are arbitrary regulations that has shut down a bar and restaurant called Mac's Public House. And what they did is they had a bunch of sheriffs there preventing people from entering the bar. And my thought process was this: if these sheriffs are enforcing an illegal order from the mayor, can we do a citizen's arrest of sheriffs? And if they're following illegal orders to close a business, I asked these sheriffs, if the mayor asked you to go inside there and murder Danny, would you do it? At what point does this just following orders thing stop?
Well, here's the quandary in terms of the accepted so-called establishment legal system, which is the law of man, not the law of nature or the law of God. And it applies to judges too. This is another problem, and it applies to prosecutors. It applies to bar councils that want to persecute conservative lawyers and others in anticipation of Joe Biden becoming president. They know that, and that's happening in my case because they know I'll sue Biden, over and over again for his crimes. Okay, so what they claim is that they have immunity. This immunity was never legislated by Congress or any state legislature. It was created by fiat, by themselves, in effect, by judges who decided they were going to give themselves immunity and give prosecutors immunity. There's no such thing in the law. So if you go to arrest a sheriff, he's going to claim I have immunity as long as I'm acting within the scope of my official duties. Now, the big question is, what are your official duties? Is it to conduct arrests of people that are simply trying to live their life and aren't bothering anybody? Yeah. The courts will back them up. These compromised and corrupt judges at both the federal and state level will scratch the backs of those that will then scratch their backs. So we don't have judges with a lot of courage. I talk about that in the book, and we have judges who have been co-opted by the establishment. But there's 3 fundamental premises here. Number one, these judges are unelected, so they behave as tyrants. They do what they please. They dismiss cases before those cases get to a jury. They've destroyed our jury system, primarily the federal judges. Secondly, they claim they have life tenure, which they don't. The Constitution says they shall only serve for good behavior. And our 244 years, we've only impeached 8 judges. And one of the last ones, Alice C. Hastings, was impeached for bribery from Miami. He later ran for Congress and has been there ever since. It's kind of like the distinguished gentleman of Eddie Murphy in many ways. And then, of course, they claim have immunity on top of that, which needs to be removed. But Congress will never remove it. However, I don't recognize that immunity. They have no immunity. There's no legal basis for it. And if someone sees that a felony is being convicted, in my view, whether it's a law enforcement officer or anybody else, they have the right to conduct a citizen's arrest. Now, the quandary becomes, what do you do when you arrest them? Because the law is established. It says you turn them over to law enforcement. And law enforcement, obviously, in today's age, is not going to enforce a citizen's arrest in most instances when you're dealing here with high-level government officials, politicians, sheriffs, etc.
Right.
So what do you do? I'm not advocating violence. I'm not advocating to use force. But, if President Trump, by some stroke of luck and God, survives, I would hope that he would enforce, bringing indictments, trying guilty people, sentencing them, and carrying out citizens' arrests, and assist us in that task. Because, frankly, he has no attorney general. His last questionable pick, blowhard Bill Barr, has just thrown him under the bus to save his own skin. So that's where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to make sure that we're careful. So, Jason, I think that there's a fine line between the two cases in particular that I wanted to talk to Larry about are the two that I've been working on for the last 3 years. So for the last 3 years, Larry, I've only been working on two cases. And I don't know, Jason, if you have that PDF I sent you, maybe we can go to the second page or the third page. And let me explain to Larry, first of all, why I'm wearing the sunglasses and the hat. So as you said, Larry, in some cases, journalism is risky. And the people that I have alleged were behind the Las Vegas shooting are people, let's go to the next page, are people who have the ability and the means to have me eliminated. And there's a guy named Phil Haney who was investigating these same people, and he's been murdered. He was murdered back in February. And he was investigating the same people I'm investigating. And so I've named names of very powerful people with regards to the Vegas shooting. And then this coronavirus thing breaks out. And I don't know if you've seen this map. Can Larry see that red map? Have you seen that map on TV, Larry?
Should be able to.
Can you see?
I may have. I'm not sure. Let me put on my reading glasses.
Okay. So most of the news stations. Yeah. So most of the news stations have used it. It's the Johns Hopkins map that shows the outbreak. Well, I developed this software 30 years ago when I worked at Oracle. That's my product. That's my system. And so when I realized that Johns Hopkins was using my software to map the virus, how many minutes do you think it took me to find the holes?
Not many.
Milliseconds.
Yeah. So why don't we go to the next slide and let's lay it out for Larry what we're going to talk about when we go to our patron only thing. I like to do bottom line up front, Larry. So what's the net? We're here to talk about two things. Negligent manslaughter. What is it? What would it look like? And might it be sitting right in front of us? And I want you to help the audience understand the definitions. And I've got all the legal stuff in the deck already, Jason. You don't have to search for it. I've got it in the deck. And then the second topic is citizen's arrest. And it's something that's not to be taken lightly. But Jason has used a term in the past, prima facie. I don't know if I'm butchering it or I'm saying it right. Prima facie evidence. And I think, Jason, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you've said, I guess, paraphrasing, that I have accumulated a body of evidence regarding the Las Vegas shooting that is
unrefuted.
Astounding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
There's just nothing like it. And I think we're getting to the point where we could say the same thing about this coronavirus outbreak.
I agree.
Now, Larry, Larry's not been privy to this.
Sorry, guys, there's a little delay because John's calling in from an international thing. What was the question, Larry?
No, I was wondering if John can synthesize what his findings are with regard to the Las Vegas shooting. I had my suppositions. I don't want to say what they are until I hear from you, but
it's a bit long, Larry. Let's, if it's okay, we can explain that offline because everybody watching is very familiar, and it would take a while.
Yeah. There's a summary or two on the next slide. Just jump to the next slide or two, and we'll wrap it up. All right. So on the first topic on negligent manslaughter, again, you've not been privy to all this body of research, and Jason, we don't do a pre-call. So the net of this is there's more people dead in the United States right now from influenza than from COVID by a significant number. And more than half of the people who are being reported as dead with COVID also have influenza. I'm accessing the CDC's website, and the question is, if there's 400,000 people in America who are dead from influenza, how did that happen? Is that negligence? So that's what we're going to talk about. And then let's go to the next slide, Jason, if we can. The second topic is citizen's arrest in the event of malfeasance. So this is really the impeachment of a sheriff, right? I've seen other sheriffs that have been impeached. We believe that the evidence in Las Vegas, well, I shouldn't say we believe, we have evidence that would suggest that the crime scene in Las Vegas was forged, and that the window in room 135 wasn't broken until after the shooting, and none of the weapons in the room in 135 have been linked to any of the victims with ballistic testing. None. And we had Dr. Cyril Wecht on the show a week or two ago, and he about fell out of his chair when he heard that, and that there were no diagrams done, no trajectory diagrams on any of the autopsies, and none of the bullets that were recovered from the victims were tested in the 3D system and linked back to the weapons in the room. That wasn't done.
Is it disputed that Stephen Paddock was involved in some way?
By us, it is.
It's disputed that he killed anybody. I'm not disputing that he brought a whole bunch of guns up to the room. That I'm sure he did. But did Stephen Paddock kill a single person? Probably not. Most likely he was the first victim. He was the first one to die. And when you hear what actually happened, it's so chilling, it's hard to believe. But we're not going to go there now. The question
We've only got about 3 minutes until we make the transition over to Subscribe Star and Patreon. So keep that in mind, John.
That's it. So basically, we've got the two topics. We've got citizen's arrest, malfeasance, impeachment in the case of Vegas. And then in the case of coronavirus, we're looking at, is this negligent manslaughter? If you've got 33,000 people dead in New York, and all of Indonesia has a fraction of that,
you get an Emmy.
You get an Emmy, but is that negligence? And is it negligence on the part of Cuomo? So we need to establish that. And basically, Larry, what I'm trying to figure out is, at what point would it constitute negligent manslaughter? How many people would need to die?
Should I answer that now, or should I wait?
No,
well,
we're going to go to
we've only got 2 minutes, so I definitely want the answer to have as much time as it needs.
Here's the quandary.
Yeah.
Governor Cuomo, in principle, I believe, is guilty of negligent manslaughter. But what I said before is the way that our establishment legal system has been set up. He's got immunity for acts that he takes in his official capacity. And state judges and federal judges will protect him on that. They will not let you reach him in terms of holding him accountable for that liability.
And what about acts he didn't take? What about lies of omission? What about knowing something that's happening and he doesn't tell anybody? What if, let's change it, instead of influenza, let's say it was lead in the water and it was 100 times worse than Flint in New York, and he knows it and doesn't say it. Is that negligent manslaughter?
Yes, it is. And here's the point I'm making, is that you have to go outside of our legal system as currently established to the laws of nature and to the laws of God that make common sense. And consequently, that's the basis for a citizen's grand jury. We're not bound by that. and nor we are bound by the immunity which prevent us from conducting a citizen's arrest. We're not bound by that. Our founding fathers were not bound by that because the laws of King George III said they couldn't do what they did in forming a new nation. They said, the heck with those laws. We're doing what God wants us to do and what we have a right to do, preserving our inalienable rights to be free and for happiness and the pursuit of happiness. So this is what we're dealing with right now. Our legal system, John, honestly, the legal profession is the most corrupt profession in the United States. I've lived it now for going on 44 years. Lawyers and judges together are the biggest problem that we have. Shakespeare said, kill all the lawyers. I'm not suggesting to kill anybody, but that's a fact. Okay, and actually years ago I was going to write a book called Kill All the Lawyers. It was suggested to me by a publisher.
That's a provocative title.
Never got written. I was going through a bad period of my life, and I never wrote.
I think we've reached the limit. reached the limit, Larry, of what YouTube is going to let us talk about. So this is a good time to go to Patreon only hour.
Not only that, we're out of time here on YouTube, but we're going to continue this conversation, and we're going to go in depth with Larry Klayman on the details of citizens' arrests and what constitutes malfeasance, under what conditions some of these political people can be impeached, removed, whatever it might be. So I hope that people will join us. This is also going to be simulcast on patreon.com/freedomwatch. So people can watch on a variety of different channels. People can subscribe to the Freedom Watch YouTube channel and keep up with all of Larry's radio shows, and he's frequently doing all kinds of appearances. We had a simulcast of this video, and also people who want to follow John can follow him on the, we had some kind of problem with the simulcast. We'll address that after the show. My apologies to subscribers on the John E. Hoover YouTube channel, but we are set up and ready to roll on Patreon and Subscribestar, so we'll look forward to seeing everybody